Okay, so let's look at this wagon train at dusk as an example of a non-narrative non-fiction piece. And we're gonna look for all of these things here. Let me put a blank piece of paper under this from my notebook. Okay, all of these things here. So we're looking for the conflict, people who are involved, the sequence of the story and transitional words, dialogue, where people are talking, descriptions, pacing, we'll talk about that at the end, precise words, descriptive details, sensory language, and a good conclusion. So I'm going to try to get some different colors here so I can really annotate my text. I know this is kind of hard for you to do since you're working with an e-text, but it is what it is. So you can watch me do it this way. If you have access to a printer, you could always print things out. Hold on. Okay, so let's highlight all the dialogue that we can find. All right, so we're gonna highlight all of the dialogue that we find in the story. So anytime we see quotation marks, and I'm seeing a lot of them. All right, let's talk a little bit about how we use quotation marks, and then we have another page over here as well. I'm not highlighting the whole thing because if I highlighted the entire part that they were saying, it would just be full of highlight. You wouldn't be able to see anything else. Okay, so let's notice a few things about when you use quotation marks. Okay, so I want you to notice the punctuation that's used. So we're like, for the first sentence, sometimes you just have to laugh. And notice there's a comma and then quotation marks because it continues. I tell my daughter who is having an especially bad day. Okay? So let's find a different way. So this has a comma, quotation marks, and then the end punctuation is right here at the end of the sentence. Let's see. Okay, most of the punctuation they're using has that similar pattern. So here we have a comma and it ends the quotation marks. I say in my storyteller's voice, and then a comma, and then it starts the punctuation marks. So the quotation marks are kind of in between things that you're just saying. Okay, so the quotation marks are what the characters say and then what you need to tell the reader. This part is entirely in quotation marks. So it's an entire paragraph that her dad is just saying. Okay, so George and I had been in the same class since 4th grade, on and on and on. So that's just her dad talking. So that's one continuous just piece of dialogue. That's okay. All right, this one, let's see, here's some more quotation marks. Let's see how it ends here. All right, again, this was all just talking and it ended with just punctuation and quotation marks. Okay, here's the comma thing again. So then, comma, quotation marks. I want you to notice the order. So they're writing it then, comma, quotation marks, or there were more words, I'm sorry. It says I go on, and then you do comma, quotation marks, and then what the person's saying. So for some reason, dialogue was always hard for me to write as a student until I realized, oh, it's just a pattern. It's just the same order every time. It just depends on what you're saying inside the quotation marks. Okay, here's another one where it just ends. So it looks like it starts all the way up here and it goes all the way to here. This is something that I think her dad is saying. Okay, again, it ends here. Oh, this is the type I was looking for. So in this line it says, and then, question mark, Sarah says, knowing what comes next. So this one's a little different. Okay, the reason there's not a comma right here is because there's a question mark. Okay, so if it said something that didn't need a question mark, you could use a comma there instead of a question mark. But you need that because you need to know it's a question. So that's kind of an exception to the quotation rule. All right, same thing here, more commas, and then we go, more commas. So it looks like this is only the real exception when you don't use a comma in between, unless you're using like a whole block of dialogue here. So notice when you look at this entire story, here's the first part and here's the second part. There's a lot of dialogue going on. So that's okay. All right. Now, we can just talk about the people. I'm not going to circle a lot, but in this story, there is Sarah. There's her dad. And it's mainly them. So they're talking to each other, but also, it talks about George, which was her dad's friend when they were in school. Okay. And I think that's about it. I might be missing a character, but those are the main characters. Sarah, her dad, and then her dad's friend, George. He isn't really in the story, but her dad talks about him. Okay. All right.
Mrs. Burke.
Yeah.